Mr. Mackel, thank you for joining us in CNN Indonesia. We would like to talk about a few things. First, we have fintech, we have trade between Indonesia and Luxembourg, but let's start with Brexit. How interesting are the talks right now with Brexit, and where is Luxembourg's position?
Well, the talks on Brexit have, of course, first of all, a political dimension that is happening in Brussels. The European Union has appointed a common negotiator, Mr. Barnier. He speaks for the whole of the 27 EU member states that Britain is negotiating with, and they have appointed their own negotiator, David Davis. That is, of course, a very interesting process. And then next to that, you obviously also have a business dimension to it. That is what the individual financial institutions are doing.
Okay.
And Luxembourg in this process, of course, well, first of all, I think we made it very clear from the beginning on, right after the referendum, that we very much regretted the decision of the British people. We obviously also respect it. It's a sovereign decision by the British people to leave the European Union. We do not share the idea that this could be any way beneficial to anybody, neither for the European Union, nor certainly for the United Kingdom and its population or its economy. This being said, there are decisions that financial institutions are taking currently, have taken already, and a number of them have chosen to set up operations in Luxembourg or use those operations they already have in Luxembourg to consolidate their activity there.
Yes. Private banking being one of Luxembourg's main products as well. I know that Citibank has also mentioned they want to open office in Luxembourg, and also other than that, JP Morgan Chase. Is that some of the many opportunities that are exposed post-Brexit?
Well, Luxembourg obviously is one of the leading wealth management hubs in Luxembourg. Luxembourg thus has acquired over a number of years expertise in this and has built up an ecosystem that can very well support this activity. But next to that, obviously the backbone, the flagship of our financial services industry is built on investment funds. And that is where I think that we will see the largest additions to Luxembourg's financial services industry. Many of the fund promoters, of the asset managers, have already a presence in Luxembourg, but they are adding activity to it, and that is where I think the largest chunk will come from. Okay. Then we had next to that also quite some success with insurance companies. 10 very large insurance companies, AIG, Liberty Mutual, Hiscox, RSA, but also some Asian ones from Japan in particular, Tokyo Marine, Andy and Sompo have chosen Luxembourg for their post-Brexit European operations.
Yeah. Do you see competitiveness with other European states? A lot of people see Dublin. A lot of people also see Paris. How does Luxembourg differentiate itself from the other European countries?
Yeah, I think you forgot to mention Frankfurt, because Frankfurt probably is on the top of, should be on the top of that list. There is competition and yet not, because what actually happens is that the financial institutions are looking at, first of all, where do we already have a presence? Sometimes they have a presence in several of these jurisdictions. That was the case, for instance, for JP Morgan, who said we will relocate some activity to Frankfurt, some activity to Luxembourg, and some activity to Dublin. But that is exactly the point. They will relocate some activities to where it makes most sense to relocate them to, meaning where the local financial services ecosystem is best geared to support this particular activity. That is where Frankfurt comes in for trading activities, Luxembourg and Dublin come in for investment funds, Luxembourg also for wealth management activities. Paris and Frankfurt are probably the two best for capital markets operations and euro clearing once that discussion will open.
So it's been segmented properly between the euro countries?
I think that you have seen over the last years the different financial centers in Europe acquiring more of a specialization, really building clusters and ecosystems that are particularly well suited for certain activities and less active in other activities. And that is exactly what is playing out now with Brexit. That is why asset managers go to Luxembourg or to Dublin. That is why trading activities go to Frankfurt, for instance.
Okay. What about U.S. tax cuts plans? Do you think it affects Luxembourg? Because that probably sets a new level for regulators in the Eurozone in terms of how they tax multinational companies.
Yes, I think that Luxembourg certainly will not be affected by this in any particular way, at least not more than any others. I think the US tax cuts, first of all, they come from a very high level, but what is maybe there to say is that they come on a unilateral basis, while the European Union had, over the last couple of years, together with other international partners, also from Asia, worked through OECD to make sure that taxation of multinational companies was fair. And that is where the European Union, I think, would want to see also the US join in.
So the tax cuts in the US won't really affect?
I haven't quite understood yet how they could affect Luxembourg. I've been asked this question occasionally, but so far I haven't quite seen how they would affect Luxembourg in any particular way.
Okay, let's go to fintech. I know that Luxembourg is a financial hub in Europe, and what's the mid-term and long-term goals that wants to be achieved in fintech?
Yeah, I think like all financial hubs, Luxembourg, of course, saw the emergence of this financial technology disruption phenomenon rising over the last couple of years in parallel to the increasing use of mobile devices. And that is where the consumers in particular wanted faster, more convenient solutions. This, of course, put traditional financial institutions in a certain challenge.
Yeah. How hard is it to build the bridge between the disruptive and the established?
I think that is not hard anymore. It was hard 3, 4, 5 years ago when, as Jamie Dimon said, the banks looked at the startups as if they were out to take their lunch, and the startups thought they could do it on their own.
Yeah.
I think both of these sides have realized that they need each other, that they cannot do it without one or the other. The startups have understood that the banks have the experience and have the customer base. The banks have understood that the startups are the creative part. So if you want to come up with a new solution, you need people that are creative.
Yeah, but how complicated is it in terms of regulation? Because with disruptive technology, I imagine that there will be things that are not yet regulated, such as the cryptocurrencies that are booming right now. A lot of governments are actually banning because they don't know what to do with it. What is Luxembourg's take on cryptocurrencies?
Yeah. I think Luxembourg has looked into cryptocurrencies with a very open mind. Our regulator has in February 2014 issued a statement, and it was, I think at the time, one of the first regulators in Europe to make such a clear statement about cryptocurrencies. What it said was very simple. It said cryptocurrencies, virtual currencies, are money. And anybody dealing in money is dealing in financial services and thus should be regulated. How you should be regulated, under what regulation you will fall, depends on your activities. And today we had, no later than this week, the largest Japanese Bitcoin exchange, Bitflyer, was granted a license in Luxembourg. So was Bitstamp, for instance, and 2 or 3 others. And that allowed to really make sure that these cryptocurrency players we're respecting all the rules in anti-money laundering, know your customer, and so on, because they wanted to be regulated.
I wanted to ask you, is there any barriers that are still being faced right now between Indonesia and Luxembourg in terms of trading?
There may be some restrictions remaining, especially when it comes to distribution of foreign funds and thus also Luxembourg domiciled investment funds in the Indonesian market. I think that is one area where we would like to address and where we have spoken to about today with OJK, the supervisory authority here in Indonesia. We are very interested in developing our relationship with Indonesia. In Islamic finance, there certainly is a potential to develop this activity, but also beyond that. One area that we were very much interested in is, for instance, green finance, climate finance, where Luxembourg is also playing a leading role and where I think that the global community has a very strong interest for, and I understand Indonesia as well, and Luxembourg certainly can play a very strong role. Luxembourg's stock exchange also there plays a very important role. It has created a year and a half ago the Luxembourg Green Exchange, which is a specific, dedicated listing platform for green bonds. In fact, Luxembourg's stock exchange was the exchange where the first global green bond was listed in 2007.
How is the response so far?
It is very positive, very much interested. The Indonesians that we have met, whether they are from the banks, from the authorities, are obviously very interested in how they can also develop their relations with Luxembourg, because it's obviously about more than just Luxembourg as a market. Luxembourg gives access to a community of European and global investors.
And also, one of our main exports is actually CPO, palm oil. I know that there's been going on talks about how the Eurozone is accepting Indonesian palm oils. Is that something that Luxembourg is advocating or interested in terms of talking between the Euro countries?
I think Luxembourg is certainly interested in developing more generally the trade relations and the framework within which this trade is developing between Indonesia on the one hand and the European Union as such. We are part of a larger customs union, and thus it's the European Commission that is leading these negotiations. But obviously the member states, and Luxembourg as well, are associated in framing this discussion. Luxembourg certainly is a country that is very much favoring open trade, liberalization of trade. The question then is on certain issues, palm oil in particular. I must admit I'm not an expert on palm oil trade and the European position on that, so I do not know on this particular issue where we stand, but in general Luxembourg is supporting open trade where we can.
Okay. Mr. Mackel, thank you for joining us with CNN
It's been a
Indonesia
pleasure.
Business.
Thank you.
Thank you.